birth control pill was the treatment, heavy on the air quotes, for everything, for ovarian cysts, for bleeding, for migraines, for depression, for acne. And it's not called the acne pill. It's linked to liver cancer. And we're letting people take this medication without giving them that information. Like most women, when they go on the birth control pill, it's, oh, you might get a blood clot. If your calf hurts, go to your doctor.
I gotta get myself a little more faith, a little more love.
I'm your host, Christa Bigler, and I'm going to guess we have at least one thing in common, that we're both in pursuit of a less stressed life. On this show, I'll be interviewing experts and sharing clinical pearls from my years of practice to support high-performing, health-savvy women in pursuit of abundance and a less stressed life. One of my beliefs is that we always have options for getting the results we want, so let's see what's out there together. All right, today on the Less Stressed Life, I have back Danielle Kepics. And if you remember, she was here talking about hair loss not very long ago. She has a unique background for which she's become known as a unicorn in the women's health space as a certified fertility educator, master's level mental health therapist, a certified nutrition coach, and in a prior life spent 5 years as a personal trainer. After 10 years of practicing conventional medicine, she shifted her focus and pursued a certification as an FDNP, where she now helps women and some men optimize their health and lifestyle through deep dives into their health. But I think I missed it here again. She's also a PA. Welcome back, Danielle.
Welcome back. I won't sing for people.
Yeah, it's good. I can't remember what happened after our last interview, but I was like, hey, why don't you? I think I was finding some Danielle rants on birth control, and I was thinking, I don't know if we really covered that topic for a minute. So let's just go ahead and talk about birth control today, because you feel it's always fun to ask people what are either you excited about or what is like annoying you right now, because that's good stuff.
Yes, it is.
It's good stuff. So let's talk about, we're coming from, let's see, 10 years actually practicing in conventional medicine. And so
almost, yeah.
I'm sure you saw some things. And on that note, it doesn't feel like you could be old enough to have gone through that and then be where you are now. That's what I like to think about with my age too. I'm like, does it feel like it could be that long? I always like to start with a personal story. So I'm curious if you also have a personal story with birth control, whether it's what you saw for patients, and maybe you want to weave it all together a little bit as well, what you saw conventionally.
Yeah, totally. I'm an open book. So I don't know who I was talking to about this, but I was thinking back to when I went to college. It was like you went to the gynecologist to get put on birth control because you were going to college. And I'm like, I didn't even have sex until I was 21. Like I was not sexually active. And for some reason it was still like this, oh, when you go to college, you get put on the pill, which is just so messed up in my opinion, which was my first experience with the birth control pill. And I think it did have, listen, thank God I wasn't having sex because I wasn't taking it correctly. Like your girl was missing doses. It was not being done right. I was like taking multiple pills, like on missed dose anyways. And
so you were told that you should go on it in college, so you did?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Like it was just, yeah, I didn't know any better. My mom died when I was 16, so my aunt took me, and it was just like the thing that she felt. It was a messed up situation, obviously. My brain was like not in a place to be like
making a decision.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I know a lot of women who have an also similar story to that. Some of these people, they were like 15 being put on birth control just because that's like what you do with a teenager. And I'm like, that's weird. So I don't have a lot of memories of that. I do think that it did mess with my emotional state quite a bit, just remembering the volatility of college, just of my emotional state and how I felt. But I would say the more prominent experience that I had and that was more influential in me and who I became and the practitioner that I became for other women came when I had a copper IUD, and then I was like, why should I bleed when I don't have to? Let me get the Mirena. Just like such a messed up mindset. Just viewing your period as inconvenient when it's like the sign of health. And the copper IUD has its own set of issues that I'm happy to talk about and get into, but I ended up getting a Mirena IUD. And fast forward years later, this was, I think I had got the copper IUD. God, it was like probably right before I went to PA school. So 10, 12, 13 years ago. And then I swapped over while I was in PA school to the Mirena. And I remember in 2018, I had gone through this period. I was always this girl who really fed herself well. Like people would always comment on how much food I eat. And this is related. I realize I'm skipping around a little bit here. It's the luteal phase. It does it to your brain.
Yes, I understand.
I was always this girl who just, I ate all this food. The guys would even be like, you eat so much food. And I was always super fit and super lean. And I was probably eating 4,000 calories a day. It was obscene. I would eat anything in sight. And then I was in the CrossFit scene. And I was really competitive. And so that was when macro counting was really big. And listen, when you're a type A person, you are the person who's going to get an eating disorder from macros, which is a whole other rabbit hole, I realize. But I became that person of very orthorexic, very disordered. And this had led me down the rabbit hole to like find certain people when things were going awry with me, of like I was gaining weight on the same amount of food. I was losing my appetite. I wasn't pooping well. I've always been someone who like wakes up and I just go straight to the toilet and I poop, and it just wasn't happening. So I'm like, this is not normal. I'm not hungry. And my thyroid was completely downregulated. So I started like doing some research and some reading and things on my own. And I found Jolene Brighton, who, if you guys don't know who Jolene is, she is the author of Beyond the Pill. She's really a trailblazer in women's health. Go look her up. She's great. And so I read Beyond the Pill and I was like, I thought to myself, like, this woman seems really smart and this makes a lot of sense to me. And this is circa before like social media became very polarizing and people were yelling at each other and all of these things. And the good old day. And I just felt like
posting pictures of our food.
TBT with the latte. But I was like, this makes so much sense. And I was like, I got to get this thing out of me. And so it was like the next month and I had my IUD removed and I'm just doing all of this reading. And I'm like, why was I not taught this in PA school? I was outraged. I was so mad about all of this, that like all of these side effects of birth control that no one hears about. And listen, I know that no PA school can teach everything, right? You're in a classroom for 1 year and it's drinking water from a fire hose. But birth control pill was the treatment, heavy on the air quotes, for everything, for ovarian cysts, for bleeding, for migraines, for depression, for acne. And it's not called the acne pill. I just put a post up about this, or I scheduled one or something. I started thinking about all the things that practitioners give women the birth control pill for. We are literally shutting down their hormones. And I'm like, never in a million years would we ever see a medical treatment that shut down a man's testosterone that we gave him for every single complaint. And it just blew my brains all over the wall in not a good way. And that was really the moment. And then I found more people like Nicole Jardim and Sarah Hill and all of these women who are doing all this amazing work and are still doing all this amazing work. And I was like, it just made so much sense to me. And I didn't even know what functional medicine was at that point. And there was no fight between conventional and functional medicine. But I was just using my own brain and doing critical thought. And I was like, this just all makes so much sense. And why was I not taught this? And that to me was like really where everything started to come together for me. And I've got a whole bookshelf over here of 72 bajillion books that I've read on varying topics. But I just deep dove and I just could not believe the things that were not talked about in doctors' offices.
So you started having some symptoms, right? You were not pooping well. And like you were aware, sometimes the symptoms aren't loud enough for people to actually, it would be easy for you to be going through PA school and just be like, I'm stressed. And
this was after PA school. And that was like,
after.
Yeah. And this was more related to like my under eating. Like, I don't necessarily know if I had symptoms on birth control. I can tell you I wasn't cycling on the Mirena because it took 6 months for me to even have a period. And I was under eating. So there were multiple factors to that. Like, I will say, like, I personally can't tie that apart, but I work with a lot of women who I'm like, you're not cycling. Like, they like to say, oh, you still cycle like almost all the time on the Mirena. Women don't, in my experience with the women that I work with. But I do think there were some things, especially emotionally, that I wasn't feeling because I was on the birth control pill. Like, it just made me more numb, I think.
Yeah. I actually forgot, as I hear your story, I have a lot of memories flooding back to me. So I've interviewed Jolene and Nicole, and we've talked about some different things. I don't know if we've talked about it from the perspective of the fifth vital sign. And you brought up, oh, our period is a sign of health, but very often it is viewed as a sign of inconvenience until we want to have a menstrual cycle because we want to reproduce, right? And some people, and I don't think you have reproduced yet, right? And so you're ahead of this curve where I'm looking at my period as a sign of health. So I'm having these memories flood back to me. And I repressed this memory of the few months that I used birth control in my life. It was a very short amount of time, which I'm thankful for. But because I didn't know what I didn't know at the time, which is pretty much everyone
Totally.
with everything.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember the exact reason. Who knows why, all the reasons I was put on that. But I just remember my mood. I was not okay emotionally and mood wise. And I remember because it was a short amount of time, I just forgot about it until you brought up the mood thing. I was like, oh, yes. And then I remember the one I was on later, seeing probably one of those ads on TV where they were suing because people did crazy things, like lost their brain on that one. I was like, awesome. That's very exciting. So there's a lot of potential. I think the conversation then takes us to side effects. Maybe let's talk about why is it given? I think probably the people listening to this know this, but let's just maybe start with the beginning, which is why are we giving this out as a treatment for all of these different conditions?
I wish I knew the answer to that. Like, I think it's because it's convenient and we don't have answers and we're not deep diving in conventional medicine. So like when someone comes in with acne, oh, this is a hormonal. I love how like everything's a hormonal problem, but we don't ever want to test hormones because we can't do that and they don't matter. I say this all the time, and I just actually interviewed Stacey Whitman, and she said the same thing about dentistry that I have said about medicine. This is an institutional level problem. Like, we are not taught that there is a deeper problem with ovarian cysts and headaches and migraines and acne and fibroids or heavy bleeding or missing periods, right? So we could do a whole entire podcast on female athletes, especially in the college and high school years, who lose their period, who are put on the pill to have a quote unquote period. Yeah. The rage that you will get out of me in that conversation, there are not enough bleeps. Just not like, it blows my mind because you're not having a true period on the birth control pill. And I think that's something that a lot of women don't know and they need to know because they've created this medication that shows, oh, you're having a period. But to have a true period, you actually have to ovulate. And that's the mechanism of action of any birth control pill, is it shuts down ovulation, right? Oh, it's like, we're not having a period, we're having a withdrawal bleed here.
Yeah.
We're not taught about liver, like us having a sluggish liver or toxin buildup.
It makes sense. I'm going to use a parallel here of something that's annoying for me also. And I think it just depends on how, and I think there's a different, we'll just also say that there's different strokes for different folks because sometimes people don't really want to know. Like for me, when I see a low B12, it drives me crazy because I'm like, that's not the only, that just tells you that your digestive function or your protein assimilation or even intake is not good. Because there's several pieces that can break down. Or if your iron is low, that's pretty basic, right? We practice like elementary students instead of like high school or college students is how I liken it, is that, oh, if you just give a nutrient for a deficiency and you're not looking at where that deficiency came from. And it's very similar. If you're going to give a birth control pill to shut down hormones in case it's acne that might be hormonal, that's really lazy because we don't know how to do something related to hormones. And that's the thing is like female hormones have some complexity in that there's an up and down throughout the month. And so there's a little bit to learn, and learning takes some time, cycles, effort, takes some effort. So it is very logical that we would not do what takes effort as a human race or as an industry, because there's obviously no profit to educating your clients and having less clients throughout the day. It doesn't fit in our model of seeing 25 people a day. And to be honest, my heart breaks for practitioners who do have to see 25 people per day. And I think it's useful. I think people who listen to podcasts already know this. I always think, and I think you and I are the same, where our clients just know they want better, right? And so that's why they're seeking better, because they can't get it coming in to see their provider. And my heart breaks for the provider because I think most providers generally don't want to be practicing that way. We saw a kind of a mass exodus the last 5 years, of course, from practicing that way. But I don't know. I don't see the shift because it's like when you see fewer clients, the price goes up, and the price is already, to be perfectly honest, like the way the insurance model is, it's already stupid anyway. So it's just, it's like nothing, the math doesn't math anywhere. So it makes sense that, and so what this takes us back to is right now our option is we can blame the industry wide thing. And our option is we can regain control by taking ownership of the situation. And I think this is actually a theme I'm on this month with the podcast is I think we outsource things. We were just talking about finance stuff right before this, but I think that health and finance have parallels in that we outsource. For me, that was a lesson. It was like, oh, I was trying to outsource this thing that I actually had to understand at some level on my own too. Sorry, I had to learn something. And that's kind of how we're okay to learn because we're lifelong learners. But some people are frustrated by the concept of having to learn. Maybe initially, maybe we change our mind. But I mention this out loud because sometimes the way in which we go through health stuff, how our energy toward it gives us those particular results at that time. I hope that is helpful or useful, but I just share that because we can be frustrated. And then the next option is I can just take ownership of it. And fortunately, something really cool is you read this book and all of a sudden it opened up this whole new world for you.
World.
And it's so cool to see that happen. In fact, your story reminded me of my older teenage daughter last year. Somehow she started reading my women's health books at age 19. And she was like, oh my gosh, why do people not know this? And it was actually super interesting and cool. It was like I could have tried to tell her this stuff until I'm blue in the face. And yet she had to find the things that resonated with her and she had to come to it on her own a little bit as well. And I think that's what happens to us is like inspiration or desperation, usually. There's some desperation piece, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about that mental health piece.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the stuff that happens when you're on the pill, because I know that's part of the outrage. So you just mentioned like it doesn't regulate the cycle. That's a lie. We're not ovulating on the birth control pill.
Correct.
Birth control, we're suppressing hormones, so we're suppressing ovulation. So it's a withdrawal bleed. And I don't think we're at a point where everyone knows that. So let's just keep repeating it, right?
Yes. Agreed.
We're not there yet. So that's okay. Birth control doesn't regulate the cycle. That's a myth. Let's talk about birth control and mental health.
Yes.
What happens there? And this is really, you're an interesting person to ask this to.
I know.
You're coming from a mental health background, which is interesting to me, and I've never asked you about before. So you can weave that in there too. Tell me what happened there. But birth control and mental health.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many studies, right, showing that, first of all, more women actually commit suicide in their luteal phase. Birth control, or I guess birth control wouldn't matter, but actually in their luteal phase than their follicular phase. So we know that hormones play a massive role in mental health. I think there was even, it was the Danish study that showed that especially teenagers with IUDs were the most susceptible to having mental health issues on these IUDs. And I believe that the IUDs were the biggest culprits, but they're linked to anxiety and depression. There's many systemic reviews, large-scale observational studies, meta-analyses, whatever. There's a lot of them out there. And beyond that, just experientially, the women that I've worked with who are like, I had no idea how depressed I was. My anxiety went away. And the lesser known thing that I think people don't realize is how IUDs affect your vagus nerve, because your vagus nerve runs from your brain to your cervix. And the first time that I read this, my mind was blown. And I have talked to so many women who they're like, the instant I got my IUD taken out, my anxiety vanished. And I was like, excuse me, what? And I remember the first person who told me about this, I was like, this is BS. And then I started digging into it and I was like, this is not BS. This is back in like 2017, 2018 when I'm learning about all this stuff.
So interesting. Like the design of the vagus nerve going from the brain to the cervix. I did not know that. I wonder what God was thinking. When he did that. I can make some R-rated comments related to that. Not really.
Yes.
But whereas, does that mean stimulation to reproductive organs is helpful for stimulating the vagus nerve? I don't know. It's upside down. I don't know. I'm just like wondering why.
I've never thought about that.
Cervix. I'm just intrigued. Oh, why? Wonder why it goes there. Interesting. It was my first time I knew that because,
yeah, crazy. But then if we even just think about PMS and PMDD, right, which is separate from the birth control pill, that's an issue with progesterone levels, with GABA. Like we know that our hormones impact our brain function. There are so many women that I work with who they are non-functional for 2 weeks out of the month when they start with me because of how bad their PMS or PMDD is. Hormones definitely play a huge role. And the birth control pill, it rocks people's worlds.
Yeah, I think we should go next to nutrients impacted by hormones because that's the normal path I would walk down when looking at mental health is like, what nutrients do you not have to make neurotransmitters, et cetera? Because, and we talked earlier, so we know that the birth control pill impacts microbiota. We know it impacts certain nutrients. We know it impacts liver function. But let's talk about specifically nutrients or nutrient.
Yeah, B vitamins for sure. B vitamins play a huge role in neurotransmitter development. And B vitamins are 100% depleted by the birth control pill. We know this. We have studies to show it. There is a podcast out there with Carrie Jones and Kate Henry that I give to, I don't know, every single client that I see, where they talk about the link between food and mental health. So really great additional resource if people are looking for like specifics on that. But yeah, the birth control pill depletes all of our B vitamins. And I will tell you, I run a good number of micronutrient tests on people. My women are all low intracellularly on, and I wouldn't even say like super, super low, but they're all on that low end. B1 specifically, which plays a big role in mood. But yes, and think about what decades on this does to people.
Yeah.
And so how many women actually know that are on birth control, like maybe they're actually using it appropriately, they need to be on it, whatever. Like, I don't judge people for their choices. I just want people to be informed. How many doctors are out there telling women like, hey, you need to take a really good high quality B complex while you're on this? Sure, I'm sure there's some out there, but I'm also willing to bet that it's few and far between.
Yeah. B vitamins also huge for liver detoxification.
Yep.
And then any kind of medication, actually anything you put in your mouth or on your skin or you inhale would have to be cleared by your drainage and detoxification systems that does not belong in your body. And so I always say this is a very nutrient dependent process. So the B vitamins are part of that nutrient dependent process, but because of the nature of birth control being, we call this a xenobiotic, right? I'm sorry.
Xenoestrogen.
Xenoestrogen.
I guess maybe synthetic estrogen.
Yeah, so it's a medication that your body's got to process. All medications are, you would maybe know this better than I would, but all medications are supposed to be studied for their metabolism through the liver. Sometimes we do not study them next to other medications. Then people are stacked on things. Anyone who's worked in conventional medicine has seen patients on 10 plus meds for sure.
It's so common. People think no, but it's common. And here's the other thing too, like you bring up the liver. Birth control is a class 1 liver carcinogen.
Yeah.
Like,
what is
on what fucking planet are we not?
What is that?
This?
What does that mean exactly?
It means that it's been linked to cause liver cancer.
Is a number 1 cause. Like class 1 versus class 3? I don't know.
I would have to look up exactly what the difference was to that. I don't know. I'm happy to look it up while we're chatting. But there are definitely links between liver cancer and even just like liver tumors too. I know people who have had like hemangiomas or like benign liver tumors, but it's like, why is something growing where it shouldn't? Like, how is that benign? Like, I've never really understood.
I have so many feelings about that topic.
But yeah, it's linked to liver cancer. And we're just like, we're letting people take this medication without giving them that information. Like most women, when they go on the birth control pill, it's, oh, you might get a blood clot. If your calf hurts, go to your doctor.
That's also immediately fatal, by the way.
Yeah.
Immediately fatal.
Fine.
Yeah. Until certain things happen to people that you know or love or work with or whatever, sometimes it doesn't hit you the same. But just anytime someone brings up a blood clot, I'm like, pretty important. Yep, I would call that real high of importance. I see class 1 carcinogen class 1 versus class 3 is just strength of evidence. So class 1 is like 100 absolutely strong convincing evidence that this substance causes cancer.
Why are they not being told this?
Like examples is tobacco, asbestos, formaldehyde, and processed meats.
Like birth control's right in there with all that shit. And we're just like throwing women on it for things that are, the part that outrages me is these are so preventable things, right? This heavy bleeding that women are having. So many women who come to me, it's like they're drinking a bunch of alcohol or they're not eating enough food or they're nutrient deficient or they have raging gut issues that like we run a GI map and in 6 months their diarrhea is gone and their periods are managed or they have a magnesium deficiency. These things are so, yes, it's going to cost you extra money to like work with someone to fix these problems, but the cost of the problems of being on birth control long term, like I get it. And I get that everyone can't afford to work with us one-on-one. And also we're all out there.
Buy a book for $10.
Yes, you can buy a book. You can listen to a podcast for free. I'm a huge believer in there's always something that people can do. Like magnesium. Listen, not medical advice, but many people can be dumping grams of magnesium into themselves and you are not going to be.
Yeah,
I don't suggest I'm exaggerating, but I've had that women who are vomiting and throwing up magnesium omegas and vitamin E gone. But those are the people who spend years and decades on birth control suppressing their natural bodily processes. There is no other medication out there that suppresses a bodily function that is supposed to be happening. And that is not talked about enough. And I will not shut up about it until the end of time.
No, I think that's good. I think I think you could just have an entire business around that. I help people who've been injured by birth control. You probably won't get many people in prevention, unfortunately, on that end. And I don't know. I'd like to believe sometimes I can't really tell if I just am in like a bit of an echo chamber where I'm like, okay, we're
Yeah.
making progress in this area,
Ugh.
or are we not? I feel like we are because we
I feel like we are. So
think
I
so
saw
too.
this. I saw this post, and I don't know. She was some random girl who was talking about her experience about her OBGYN, and there were women, like not creators, not like practitioners in the comments going, "Girl, this isn't right. Like your periods, your vitals." There were women in the comments like hyping her up. This is wrong. See somebody else. Like tagging people that I like, other health and wellness practitioners in the comments, and I'm like, God bless. So there are moments of hope that I see this, and I'm like, people are waking up. I think the last 5 years have been very pivotal in that, and people just like asking more questions and being aware of certain things. And then I see things, certain people, certain gynecologists posting things on the internet, I will not use names, that I'm just like, oh, we're not going anywhere. Like they're just, I feel like I'm on like this,
Pendulum.
yes, like I've whiplash.
I can understand that. And I think, yeah, I like to wear rose-colored glasses if I can. And I was just thinking about, I was speaking to my local high school students, which is so funny because they used to make me sweat because kids, like high school kids, middle school kids are a little more eager. High school kids will somewhat heckle you and cross their arms and you're in front of. So anyway, I accepted an invitation to speak to my high school last month. And I think I was asked because it was National Nutrition Month. I wasn't really given the context. I was just making assumptions. And I was like, yeah, I want to talk about breast work. And so I went and I did. And we talked about, I just made sure to ask them lots of questions and engage them. But what I was encouraged by was that they knew I got good answers about like mouth breathing and nose breathing. And I was like, unless you're and I know you love this topic, unless you're this Instagram generation getting this information, like how do kids know that at that point? I'm just impressed. I'm like, this is a good thing. And actually, next time they invite me back, you think they'll let me talk about birth control? It seems a little hot topic, but they're teaching my like 12-year-old was tested on the reproductive system of males and females like a couple of months ago. So I think it would probably be okay to talk about birth control. Now I'm going to put this one in my pocket as a good topic because there's a lot here. And I will say that there's a lot of opportunity for us in our roles. Two of my favorite topics are some of our stress hormones, adrenals, and like subclinical thyroid stuff, which is how you started this conversation. And one of my other favorite topics is drainage and detoxification. And it's just because these are part 1 and part 2 of my major health crises and stories. And also, you're not going to go to the doctor and be like, will you test my liver? They're going to maybe test like a couple dollar enzymes, but usually that's not going to be, personally, I don't think it's going to be off unless there's something really awry. And there's a lot more symptoms and issues that can be happening before your blood work is off. And so I bring this up because
it's so important to know.
I just think let's improve our knowledge around this because we know we have work to do when I think I need to test my hormones and what kind of detox could I do? It's, oh man, let's talk about this a little bit bigger. Let's talk about it from a more helpful perspective, and would be my comment there. Okay, so here's what we've talked about so far. We talked about how birth control doesn't regulate the cycle, and we talked about how it's down-regulating hormones and how you're not ovulating and you have a pill bleed. We talked about class 1 carcinogen for liver cancer, which does blow my mind. Something else that blew my mind was the vagus nerve running from the brain to the cervix, which is just interesting. So if the vagus nerve is slowed down, anything bad could happen. Basically, I would say if you had to give reasons, we've done entire podcasts on the vagus nerve. Digestion would be a huge piece if the vagus nerve is sluggish. That's the one that like comes to mind for me, but also nervous system would be affected. Is there anything you want to mention about if this is impacting the vagus nerve? Here is some other possible downstream negatives. Mental health as well.
Yeah, I would want people to think of it like shutting down Pacific Highway 1. Like the vagus nerve it touches everything.
Yeah.
You know, so they have those. I don't know if
we should have done more Danielle analogies here so far.
I have a lot of them.
As I continue, please interrupt me and you just insert your analogies.
100%. But yeah, I would just think of it like shutting down a major highway vessel. Like everything is going to be impacted from that level up. Digestion, yes, a major one. Mental health, like you mentioned, sleep, stress management, even just the way that we respond to our daily lives. I think this is something that we don't think about with the impact of the vagus nerve and like the tone of your vagal nerve, as people like to say. but like the hypervigilance that people feel and how that affects you because of what's going on with that vagus nerve, and then how that affects it just all stacks. Like I just, when people are the anxiety level that people feel when their vagus nerve is not responding correctly or you're hypervigilant, it all stacks on one another.
There's something else that you brought up in our notes about birth control changing who we're attracted to.
Yeah. Yeah. This and the stripper conversation is like one of my favorite things to talk about with birth control. Have you read Your Brain on Birth Control? Do you know Sarah Hill? Sarah Hill is a PhD researcher at Vanderbilt, Texas. I don't know. I don't want to say, but she has a new book coming out in September. She's a wonderful women's health researcher, and she wrote the book, Your Brain on Birth Control. So what the research that she found that she placed in her book, when women came off of birth control, some of them hated their partners. Didn't like the way that they smelled, didn't like the way that they acted, divorced after 20 years. Like we found that literally the birth control pill was changing who we were attracted to, because it changes the way that you smell too, and your pheromones and all of this, which is where the stripper study comes in. I don't know
the stripper study.
I love telling people about the stripper study who don't know about it. I also learned about this through Sarah Hill, who again, just amazing resource and like doing all of the good Lord's work in women's health. But she talked about this study in her book, and I'm paraphrasing here, so no one hold a fire to my feet. But they basically studied strippers and ones who were on the birth control pill, ones who were not on the birth control pill and in their follicular phase, either in their ovulatory window or in their luteal phase. Guess which strippers made the most money?
Ovulation.
Ding dong. Yep. That is just because it's why men are more attracted to us. It's why they want to have sex with us more. It's why you want to have sex more during your ovulatory phase, because that's when you're fertile, whether you want to have kids or not. Listen, I never want children, but it's just a fact of life. When you ovulate, your sex drive is higher. And so they found that these men, they were making more money and they were being tipped more because men were more attracted to that, to the strippers who were ovulating. And Nicole had posted something recently about sex workers or strippers or something, and there were actually some strippers or sex workers or somebody who chimed in the comments saying this is true.
Interesting.
So I was like, this is so interesting.
Okay, so we went through several things. Actually, there are a couple more things I want to cover. We talked about nutrient deficiencies. We talked about how there's extra stress on the liver and how it disrupts microbiota, there's a lot of things that disrupt microbiota, like living with people who have crappy microbiomes can disrupt your microbiota.
Yes.
Sorry. But you sprinkled this in a little bit, and I probably should have started with more of this. I'd like to hear any like other stories, and maybe we've exhausted some of them, but I highly doubt it. Any other stories from women or clients that have come off of birth control or anything that like comes to your mind? I like stories a lot.
Yeah, I have a really good one. So this was actually someone who I knew came to me. She was on a birth control pill, but wanted to get an IUD. And just for the convenience of it, she didn't want to be worried about taking a pill at the same time. She was sexually active, like whatever. She had learned a lot from me. And she started out of nowhere having UTIs. Out of nowhere. And she went through 3 courses of antibiotics in 6 months. And she's, Danielle, I have no idea, like, what is going on? And I went through, asked her a couple of questions. What's changed? Blah, blah, blah. And this started happening when I had my IUD placed. Long story short, she saw a nephrologist, which is a kidney doctor, or maybe she'd been to urology and then nephrology. They ran some tests on her. I don't know if they did like a scope on her or if they had done just like a CT scan, but they said that she had some physiologic abnormality with her ureter, and that's why she was getting UTIs. And I told her, I said, listen to me. I said, maybe you do, but you are 21 years old and you've never had a UTI in your life before you put that IUD in your body. I would 100% take that thing out and go back on the birth control pill that you were on and see if it goes away before I would let somebody cut into me. I'll give you one guess as to what happened. She never had it. She took her IUD out, never had a UTI ever again.
Oh, yeah. We were coming up with the mechanism of why this happened.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh.
No, you're good. So people also don't know that birth control UTIs, they can also increase your chance for vaginal infections. They can change the pH, your vaginal microbiome. And she never had she never had another UTI ever again. Even still to this day, I will still ask her, have you had another UTI? Nope.
Yeah. Very interesting.
So that is one that sticks out to me. My women who I mentioned earlier, the women who are like vomiting and throwing up from pain and things like that, and getting them on magnesium, vitamin E, and a good quality omega, gone. Like those things really stick out to me. Women who have they've had heavy, painful periods for their whole life and have never they were put on the birth control pill and they come off trying to conceive. And has anybody ever possibly talked to you about endo and they're having like fertility issues? those situations stick out to me. Fertility issues also really stick out to me. I know they say it doesn't cause fertility issues, but I believe, I don't want to like misspeak about this, but I feel like in Real Food for Fertility, Lisa and Lily talked a little bit about prolonged, like a delayed return to fertility that we are starting to see in the studies. But those situations really stick out to me because we have a fertility crisis in this country. Why are, like, I just don't understand why it's like,
We have to be reactive first.
We shut down these systems for women for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And then when they don't get pregnant right away, we're like, oh, don't worry about it. Nothing's wrong. It wasn't the birth control pill. Like, you just severed that connection for decades. And you're telling me that shit's going to go back online like nothing ever happened? We're going to go from nothing to 5G internet with no sputtering in between of AOL dial-up? It just, I don't need a double-blind placebo-controlled study to tell me that the birth control is messing with women's fertility. That's just opinion. That's my experience. But I just...
kind of logical. I think it's logical.
Listen, I think it's a deductive reasoning.
Right, yeah.
Well, right?
I want to talk about, I think there's been sprinkled in things, but I want to make sure we're like giving people a short list. But I want to actually I want to talk about the mechanisms of why omega, vitamin E, and magnesium could have helped the people that are in severe stuff. And so I think about it. I think here's the thing with nutrients. One nutrient does a lot of things. So I'm going to mention a couple things that Danielle may jump in and be like, also this and this. So for me, the omega-3s get used up in the inflammatory process. And I have some theories around this. I'm trying to remember where all of this came from. But basically, long story short, when they're clotting with periods, I have seen doing omegas like will literally wipe this away. Maybe because it's reducing prostaglandins.
Yes.
Maybe it's compensating for the inflammatory process. So that's part of that to me. With the vitamin E, vitamin E is like a magic man to me as well. But I feel like in this scenario, it's the progesterone mimicking effect potentially, as well as also the cell membranes along with the omegas. And then the magnesium lastly is like not only calming the nervous system, it's calming muscle contractions, which are a big thing with periods, and then also phase 2 detoxification. So those are like, I wanted to bring this up because it's like, why do those things help? So those are some of my reasons. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Those are my big ones.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I have nothing to add. Check, done.
Cool. And so I bring that up because I think it's a good segue into what can we do. I think when people are coming off birth control pills, there's several things that I think we've covered this like somewhere along the lines once upon a time in the podcast, but not probably we can cover it from different angles more often. And so the first thing that we can do, I think it's totally acceptable to replete B vitamins. You get B vitamins in the diet from organs, and you get it also from carbohydrates. And we also have restricted carbohydrates, but you also need to be able to digest them, to be honest, and grains. So there's just some big sources of B vitamins. And so I think if you're in a situation where you have a deficient, like where logically this is deficient, I think it's okay. And I especially think B's and C's are okay to supplement.
You pee out the extra. It's not, you're really not gonna overdo it.
And they're big for making energy. Like I don't see a downside to this, to be honest.
And like I said, I don't know how many micronutrient panels I've ran at this point, but most women are on the lower end anyway. Most of my women having period issues are on a B complex.
And here's another point. There's definitely research around different amounts of certain B vitamins, different things. So if first you're not successful, it's okay. Try something different. I want to offer that because a wall I don't like is I tried that and it's like, let me understand how you tried it. Because what I recommend for omega intake is substantially more than what a normal human would take. Because it's safe and it's effective. Because I prefer
2 to 3 grams.
At least. Yes, at least.
It's what, after that, it gets like usually real expensive for people.
Exactly. It gets expensive. And that's a really good dose. That's a really good dose. But the reality is most people are taking 500 because.
Yeah. And it's not enough.
Because no, you're not going to notice anything from 500. Just saying.
No.
And I understand. And that's actually, it's why I don't come out the gate swinging with omegas. Not because I don't love them, but just because there's a lot of stuff I'm managing with people. And so I like to cycle things in and out in order to conserve supplement burden, cost, which is the same thing as supplement burden, but also it's related to what your body's dealing with as well, like what you're putting in. And so it's just a phase. I have processes of teaching people things in phases, and I get to it eventually. And I think it's wonderful, but just trying to manage all of I always come in with the expectation that like multiple systems are broken. And so how do I get them unbroken online? as easily as possible for the client. And so that looks like maneuvering some things around over time. So anyway, okay, so you can do B vitamins.
Yeah.
We also know the microbiome's compromised, so you could
Yes.
take a probiotic.
Oh. So I don't know what approach you take. I like to run a GI maps on people before I just.
Well, I usually do. That's a whole question. I can talk about what I do, but continue.
Yeah. For me, I take a more targeted approach at it. You can also do like intravaginal, like vaginal probiotics as well. The vaginal microbiome becomes compromised, but the probiotic and digestive system for me, I don't know. I'm interested to hear what you do too. I'm just like,
I've changed. And so I'm talking about this from a perspective of what you can DIY first. And
using like a Saccharomyces boulardii or something like that, like for.
Let me address this piece and then I'll come to the next piece, because I think it's like B vitamins, which when you're DIYing it, I don't really care. I'm not really super worried about you hurting yourself with a probiotic.
Yes. Totally. Like it's not going to hurt anything unless you have SIBO.
It's a broad topic. Yeah, it's a broad topic, but I'm not really worried about you hurting yourself.
Fair.
If anything, worst case scenario, you might be on histamine producing strains. But second, part of the process of learning yourself is experimenting. So you can DIY some things first, because for me to do a GI map, I require supervised process like of recommendations.
Same.
Because if you're not going to supervise the recommendations, then the client is not going to. It's just human behavior. You have to take into account human behavior.
And agreed. If someone's like looking for things to do on their own, I think like taking a probiotic for a couple of months is like not a bad thing to do.
Yeah. It's
low cost, potentially high yield. Yes. Agreed. If we're DIYing.
Yeah. And S. boulardii great. Totally love that. Any strain marked for vaginal health is fine. Honestly, I don't really care if you're DIYing it, because I have specific things I like to do in practice that I think really work well. I love spores.
Yes.
And I don't really care when you add probiotics. For me also, it's similar to omegas. I don't come out swinging with probiotics. Definitely when I'm working with clients, because I'm taking a more targeted approach. And that said, if you're DIYing it and you already know it screws with your microbiome, I will throw in probiotics now, because I'm not going to run GI maps on myself constantly either. And it's okay with me, because I take a more symptom-based approach at this point in practice, just because of after looking at tons of tests, you're like, okay, I see this. And sometimes
and alls.
Yeah. Yep. All
agreed.
So B vitamins, probiotics. For me though, and so I say that because I think the microbiome is got all kinds of stuff that can be going on, and that's okay. And I think you can still throw in a probiotic and just see what happens and try something else if you want. That said, like for me with liver health, I'm like, for me, probably,
oh my God.
For me, that one lights me up, where I'm like, yeah, how could I describe that? Because people sometimes ask me things like this in past, and I was like, I am trying to figure out how I would summarize that easily. Maybe take liver is how I would maybe summarize it easily from a DIY perspective. At least then it's food, just because there's so many details. Because I work with skin, and the skin is a landfill. It's a safe landfill for the body. If you take the wrong things for detox, you can create
problems
stuff. And then do you think people like that? No, they hate that. So
do not.
My life revolves around like trying not to let that happen as much as possible with humans. And so that's why for me, I'm like, supporting the liver, put less garbage in. Let's do that. But since your liver is already stressed, let's see here. You could take liver. Okay, let's do that one. Because I'm like, what could you DIY on your own that feels really like, when I'm making DIY recommendations, I like to choose things where you're like, you can't really cause a lot of harm with that.
Castor oil is another one that I will like gravitate towards for people, like unless you're pregnant, like and don't ingest it. Castor oil. Magnesium is another one.
Yep.
That for the liver. Like that. You could even argue just like drinking water for your bile flow. Like something as simple as that. Even if you're having heavy, like painful periods too, like being hydrated, like that middle layers of myometrium, like that affects that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think for me, drainage and detoxification is, I think I still love the microbiome. Don't get me wrong. And I think everyone's on the same page now, because it's been popular for literally 20 years. I do remember it being like 2008 or 9 or something like that. And I was on a plane and I was sitting next to a microbiome researcher from one big Ivy League school. And I remember having a conversation with him, asking him when he thought things took off and got popular. Because I remember doing like a senior paper on probiotics or something in 2008. Yeah. And I remember him telling me that they really got like they really took off around 2005. So we're 20 years later, which is if things have been hanging out in the research for a long time, we've been talking about them, now they're in practice. So now everyone's on the same page. That said, we got some ways to go with the adrenal, thyroid, and liver, in my opinion. And I think it will take some time because we have you have all kinds of consumer microbiome tests and whatever. And I still think like the majority of practitioners have no idea what to do with that. And I'm just saying that as my opinion that I think is fact. And it's like neutral. Like, I don't really care that you don't know what to do with it. I'm just saying the fact that there's a lot of testing out there tells me that people believe that it's probably important. Like more people believe it or understand it than don't at this point is the rose-colored glasses I'm looking through. And that said, I personally don't think there's like one singular conclusive test that's going to tell you everything you need to know about drainage detoxification. It's like a whole shitload of stuff. It's hard for me.
Yeah, and a lot of it is like the information that the person gives you too, like the information that we get during sessions with you, the information that we get from our intake forms, like that tells me so much about like a person's daily life with the products they're using.
And sometimes, and I will say like on the outset, so that's the inputs, and on the outputs, like how my body is metabolizing and utilizing things and how I'm doing personally is a little bit unique to the human. I know you're going to throw tomatoes at the screen here, but like I tell my clients all the time, we start to learn ourselves, and that's where you get magic, where you like are unlocking yourself and setting yourself free from having to see everyone forever. Because for me, if I can't get out of bed in the morning and I'm sluggish, for the math doesn't math, like I'm getting enough sleep, but I'm dragging in the morning, my circadian rhythm habits are on, like I got the other stuff there and I'm sluggish, I know that for me, that's a drainage detox symptom for me personally. So my lower energy in the morning or throughout the day, but really especially in the morning, is a drainage detox thing. And when I'm looking better, then I like jump out of bed with more energy. And that's not the first thing on the list technically, but it's like for me. And also just to wrap this, for me, every month, my period, the week before my period in my luteal phase, how I'm tolerating my coffee that week, is it causing anything for me? Is it making
interesting.
I talk to my clients about this all the time. I'm like, ooh, guess what I found this week? Drank some shitty coffee and then my heart was racing. And it's like that tells me. And then if I add some drainage and detoxification support, I can literally drink the same crappy coffee the next day without the symptoms. I've tested this multiple times.
So interesting. I'm just thinking about, I'm going to be thinking about that one for a minute. That's interesting. I believe it. That's so interesting.
Sensitive to mycotoxins. So I know
okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yep.
I was like, is this a mycotoxin thing going on here?
So I real quick backstory is that I'm a coffee snob at this point in life, but when I was not and I didn't know anything in college, there were several things, and I had lots of blood sugar stuff too that was like subtle, right? Where I gotta have snacks or whatever. But I remember driving back to college like 5 hours away with someone, and I don't remember what I drank, but it was like this super high and then this super crash, and that is how I would respond to coffee in general, or some other ones I'd have was like I'd get really tired after drinking coffee, which is obviously the opposite effect. So with that high and that crash, I thought, oh, I'm genetically not processing caffeine. That's actually not true. I've checked my genetics. Of all the crappy genetics I have, I can process caffeine. It's just that I have such crappy liver genes. And then I had a mycotoxin exposure, who knows for how long, I think multiple times over my younger life based on symptoms and like when they start to show up. And so when you have that, it lives inside of you, and getting it completely kicked out is, I think, really hard, to be honest. I think it's like you're emptying that bucket. And I also think we get exposed to stuff in our daily life. And so, for example, if I would drink, I remember after my significant skin flare of somewhere between 2015, 2016-ish, even a year or two later, if I was on vacation drinking too much crappy coffee, I would have a little tingle around my eye, and I was like, whoa, better watch it. So I have a lot of opinions about how I'm like a drug dog for mycotoxins.
I was just going to say that. I was literally
I can tell you if the coffee has mycotoxins based on my symptoms within a week. My BO stinks or whatever. And it's like, this coffee has something. And are mycotoxins the only issue with coffee? Probably not. They probably could be chemical laden. I no longer have the uncontrollable impulses to ever consume Starbucks or Caribou or whatever anymore. Like I have no desire because I've been bit.
I get that.
Been bit. I feel like garbage if I consume it. And that's okay with me. It's like, I don't.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way. this is like going down a rabbit hole, but I was talking to my friend Brooke, who is a dietitian, and I told her like 2 years ago, I started really having a different blood sugar response to like cakes and cookies specifically. And I don't eat a ton of this stuff. Like, I'm a healthy person. I eat a lot of fruit, all the things. I want to treat every once in a while. And I can do dark chocolate and I can do salt and vinegar chips. And when I hike, Sour Patch Kids and before workouts, and I have no problems. You put something that is like a brownie in front of me, I feel like absolute garbage. And I'm like, this is a perimenopause thing. Like, I'm not having cycle changes yet. Now we're like venturing into a different realm. But like, I can tell you that my blood sugar is being affected, and I've seen it on a CGM, and I like cannot get the brain fog to go away for 2 hours. It's awful. So I'm like, I don't, a totally different thing, but that when you say you know that feeling and you have it, I'm like, oh yes, I understand.
I know. You're becoming the expert of your own body, and there's going to be iterations of it. And I notice sometimes when clients, we were talking before we hit record that I had recently reformatted how I was serving clients because I was trying to correct some like little nuance things that I was noticing. And one of the things that I mentioned was occasionally clients would be frustrated. They didn't know everything I knew in a handful of months. Like they would express that. And I was like, that's an interesting frustration that you have.
Yes.
And I believe it stemmed to this sort of belief that people can sometimes have that when I get over this thing, then I will never have a problem again. And then I'll just be fine forever. And it's not exactly the same issue, but I like to tell people it's like when you had this thing happen once, you have all the things, the factors that could have it happen again. So I'm trying to teach you how to not have it again. And so if you don't want to know how to not have it again, please do not book a call to work with me because if you don't want to understand yourself, like I'm not your girl.
Same.
I want you to understand. I know we're pretty similar in those ways, but I just share that because you're becoming the expert of your body. And as am I, as is every listener, if you want to be. And when you look at it with that angle, then it's cool. Then I can look forward to my menstrual cycle to be like, and this one, which started yesterday, was like, oh, I did not find my husband annoying this week. Cool.
Everyone could breathe and chew, and I didn't want to kill anyone.
Yeah, and it was fun. It was like, cool. But I took so much drainage support because I was like, I picked up a cold traveling for Easter because I did all the things wrong, didn't get enough sleep, like all the things that would create that. Because I like to analyze why everything happens. And so I'm like trying to make it as short as possible by taking all the things. And then I got loosey-goosey after 2 days. I was like, oh, I'm over it. 2 days. And then I had a little bit of postnasal drip. So I was taking tons of drainage support, which is going to impact liver as well as I was taking like astragalus. And I have a cabinet of crap that I'm just trying to use up. And
we all do.
Yes. Wonderful. And so I was almost going to tell my team, here's all the things that I took. Because to some people, I can be an aggressive person. And I was like, and it was great. It was wonderful. I cleared up any crap I had going on. And I cleared the way for those hormones exiting. And everyone was better for it at the end. So I look at my period every month as what's the measurement of this month?
Yes, it's your monthly report card. And you don't get that when you're on birth control, just to wrap that back in. You don't get it.
Yeah. And I have to say, we have to be willing to take the bad too at some points because we sometimes don't like our report card when it's not good. This is off. And then
I've had some of those. Yes.
Me too. And what's funny about that is, don't we all look at our month and we're like, I think I was very stressed.
Yeah.
I didn't know that I was whatever. And it's obviously I was. That's a huge piece of it. Estrogen can get caught about 5 places, I would say. Stress is one place. Caffeine is another place. And phase 2 nutrients is another place. Lots of places. But anyway, okay, Danielle, we're jabbering on and it was very fun. Any last thoughts that you would want to share with someone related to birth control, coming off birth control, and then where can people find you online?
Yeah, I would say my biggest thoughts about birth control is be informed. Like, just ask questions, be curious about it. Read Jolene Brighton's book. Seriously. I also have a birth control masterclass if people want to access that. I go through a lot of things about birth control and the side effects that your doctor just doesn't have time to go through. I'm not against birth control. Like, I get a lot of hate when I talk about this stuff. And listen, like, I am for people making whatever decisions that they feel are best for themselves, but with informed consent. And I just feel like that is very lacking. So go get informed, continue to learn and be your own best advocate and learn about your body and what's best for you. That's my overarching message about birth control. People can find me. I hang out on Instagram. Come slide in my DMs. Tell me about your birth control experiences. I'm just at Danielle.Kepics. Kepics is the last name. People have trouble with that, so that's why I spell it. And yeah, this has been fun.
It has been fun. And you can go listen to Danielle's episode on hair
Hair
loss
loss.
last month if you enjoyed this one. So thanks so much for coming back to talk about birth control today.
Thanks, Christa.
Bones, but they just keep breaking.